Chest congestion. Specific.
Specific and specific are two different things. Perhaps you should be more specific when you're talking about the specifics. I'm just going to give you guys a second to write some of this stuff down.
You're gonna talk about it okay.
As we go on. You also have two people you need to know, but they're after this list, so. What do you guys think of the speakers while you guys are writing?
I was honestly too early, but the price girl, her speaker was
So the timing you don't think was good? Was it too long or something?
It was just really long and tired. Like at first, I was kind of wrong, but the second one was pretty.
Where'd you guys start off?
I couldn't sleep because there was teachers. I was right by the teacher, so I couldn't sleep.
I actually thought you had some pretty good stuff to say about immigration in the United States.
Yeah, I like it.
Well, just specifically about how we are so reactionary in our policies.
I think we're on the same.
Anyhow, so we're starting World War I today. One word on here that I didn't put on here, you'll get to eventually, I'm sure, but kind of is helpful. We're talking about the first word. Do you guys know what I mean when I say conscription?
No.
You guys know what the draft is?
Like an NBA draft?
No. Yeah, basically here's the gist.
Oh, right. It's like mail, and they're like, you're going to war.
Yeah, in a nutshell. Basically the way it works is this. You become a citizen in 18, you get a fancy schmancy little card that has your social security number on it, and it states that you need to sign up for the draft. You sign up for it, and then basically if a war breaks out that requires a large amount of people to be serving in the military, then basically you, it's like the lottery. They roll a bunch of numbers in a big cage, and when your number comes up, you are now in the Army. Now, you guys don't have to worry about it because women are exempt from the draft. So, you know, it doesn't really affect you in the direct sense. Unless, of course, you join it voluntarily, then that's, you know, that's a whole other thing. But the reason I mentioned is this word up here, pacifism. You can, if you are abhorrent to the idea of violence, you have a moral belief that violence is wrong, you can basically inform the draft department that you are a pacifist, and generally speaking, if you get drafted, they will try to put you in a position in the military where you won't actually be fighting. So, for instance, like doing paperwork, things like that. Which then begs the question, well, why wouldn't everybody do that? You know, wouldn't that be great? You know, it's like, well, that way I, you know, don't have to actually get shot at and possibly killed and things like that. And the answer is, well, in World War I, they just sort of ignored people when they said that's like, you know, you don't want to be here, neither do I, now pick up a gun. So, not to mention, there's a lot of different opinions about things in World War I. For instance, we have an understanding of the psychological horrors of war. If you came back in World War I and you were having panic attacks or something like that, you were just called a coward. And basically, there's a lot of animosity towards people like that. Yeah.
Did you say you're also like exempt from the army?
What's that? If you're a pacifist?
Yeah.
There are things conscientious objectors. Nowadays, it's kind of hard to say what would happen because, I mean, the odds of getting into a war like World War I or World War II again is just like completely unlikely. The nuclear weapon changes a lot of things about war. Putting that many people in one spot is not a real good tactical decision when you can wipe them out with one bomb. You know, so warfare has shifted to smaller numbers of people and a whole lot of misinformation and economic warfare. So, you know, could you be completely exempt from the draft? Hypothetically, but it wasn't as easy as saying, well, I object to the war effort. A lot more people said, I'm not going, and went to jail. A number of people went to other countries where they didn't have the draft, like Canada, to try to avoid it. Not so easy whenever you're living in France, though, and the war is going on in your backyard. So, pacifism, yeah. Yeah, it's not really easy to say, well, I'm not going to fight, I'm not going to resist, you know, whenever you're getting invaded. So, you know, but the thing is as we're also going to see, it doesn't necessarily just apply to a person, it's also a movement. But as I said, we're going to get to that here in a second. First, let me move on and show you guys the people you need to know. These two guys, Archduke Franz Ferdinand and Gabriele Kiesel, which are two kind of interesting people from, because to be perfectly honest, these are the two that ended up starting World War I. And we'll talk about that in a minute as well. This is sort of setting the stage. But the point I wanted to make is that before the war really gets going, there is a movement to try to end war, try to grow past the need for war. War is just a form of politics. It's just taken into another field, if you will. It's another way of going about political change. So if you can achieve the same things as war without actually having to have people die, isn't that preferable? You know, so there's going to be a lot of attempts to prevent wars from breaking out. And we're going to get to those here in a second as well. It's literally the next slide. But the other thing that comes out of this is to try to make war more humane, which seems like kind of a weird thing to say. You know, we're going to make war humane. You can't kill people with certain weapons, but you can kill people with other weapons. Isn't that kind of just like, how does that, like, does that make any sense? Well, I suppose it depends. Like, for instance, would you rather get shot with a bullet, or would you rather be burned to death with a flamethrower?
Shotgun?
Yeah, there's some weapons that are made not to kill. They're more insidious than that. Consider this. What's the purpose of a landmine?
Blows up with injuries.
You step on something, it blows up, all right? Sensible. All right, it's probably going to kill the person who steps on it, but what about everybody else around it? Injure them. Yeah. You want to maim and injure your enemy, not kill them. Here's why. If I kill an enemy soldier, I've taken one person out of the fight. If I maim one, I take him out of the fight, plus his buddies who want to make certain he gets to a doctor who will grab him and take him back behind the lines. So I might take out 2 or 3 that way. Except it also means that people are having parts of their faces ripped off. They're having legs blown off. They're having permanent damage done to their bodies that are in such a way that you can kind of see where the inhumanity of this sort of thing maybe prompts you to say, you know, this is not okay. And so there's going to be a few international peace conferences aimed at the purpose of making war more humane by banning some of these weapons. One of the weapons that's going to be banned, yet still utilized, is mustard gas. And we're gonna see all this stuff, here in a couple days.
Yeah, I can turn one off.
Was that, sir?
Wasn't Hitler affected by mustard gas?
Yes, he was actually. Adolf Hitler was an artist who, when he fought in World War I, lost his eyesight. And he eventually gained it back, although it was still weak. If you actually look at some of the photographs of him, he's wearing glasses. He would never wear glasses out in public because he had to project this sense of being strong and perfect, and this is just kind of how you showed off as a celebrity. But when he was back home behind closed doors, he wore glasses because he had really bad eyesight from the time he was in World War I. But that's actually kind of the ironic thing is how I often say that World War II wouldn't have happened about World War I? Well, when Hitler lost his eyesight, he basically lost his career. He was like, I'm never going to be able to be an artist now. What should I do with myself? And a lot of his friends were comforting him in the hospital and said, you've always been politically minded. Why don't you go into politics? And so he did, and became the head of Nazi Germany. So there's that,
You should have stuck to art, okay?
He actually was a pretty decent artist. I'll tell you what, you can find his paintings online. His favorite topic was actually nature, believe it or not. He was an avid hiker. He actually was also very enamored with architecture. So a lot of his paintings are like scenes of nature or like buildings. So he was also Austrian, not German. So he was not Jewish. I've heard that rumor go around. He was actually a secret Jew. That's not true at all. Nor was one of his family members Jewish. As we'll talk about it, that wasn't anything having to do with World War II. But I digress. So as we said, there's going to be a few attempts for international peace before we even get to the war. The first was the Olympic Games. If you think about it, the Olympics is really just a giant international competition. It's a quote-unquote war without violence. It's every nation trying to prove their best. And the idea was to take this idea of the ancient Greeks, which, again, the Olympics was a Greek tradition, but it was actually a religious festival. The Olympics, from Mount Olympus, to honor the gods of Olympus. And the idea was you brought all these various countries, in this case city-states in Greece, together, and they would compete, and they would celebrate, and they would honor the gods, and they wouldn't fight. So this was a time when everyone laid down their arms and stopped fighting and things like that. This was the idea, try to promote international peace. Furthermore, we have the Hague Tribunal and the Geneva Convention. This dictates things like what you can do with prisoners of war and things like that. Another interesting thing is we see that the women's rights movement, just like we were talking about earlier with the prohibition movements, to try to ban the sale of alcohol, in order for women to try to gain rights, they had to sort of attach themselves to other causes to get support. In this case, they tied themselves to international peace movements. They had these slogans like, we're the mothers of the world. The idea that every woman is a mother and that they wouldn't want to send their children to die in a war would mean that women wouldn't fight wars. In fact, I've heard that same rationale used today as to why women shouldn't be allowed in the military, or why women should not, or should, in some cases, be allowed to be in charge, such as being the president. Saying women shouldn't be allowed to be president because they wouldn't be willing to fight a war, or should not, or should be allowed to be president because they wouldn't fight a war and thus keep wars from breaking out. So I think it's kind of interesting. It has nothing to do with anything, clearly. Women are no more likely than not to go to war. It's just this is where that attitude comes from. It's kind of a holdover of post-Edwardian, sort of attitude. But I don't know. So there's going to be all these attempts to maintain the peace. At the same time, there are what we would call war hawks, calling for war, calling for a conflict. in various nations. Add into this the nationalist pressure that's going on, and basically the war is just a powder keg sort of situation. All it's going to take is a small spark of conflict to ignite all of Europe. And that spark comes from the Archduke Franz Ferdinand visiting a city that was in rebellion. The characters of Archduke Franz Ferdinand and Gabriel Princip are interesting because of how they're viewed in different places. For instance, if you go to Serbia, Gabriel Princip is a hero. There are statues of him, there are paintings of him. He's held as this great patriot who fought to free the country from the horror of oppression from a foreign nation. If you go to Austria, Gabriel Princip is a terrorist who ended up using basically scare tactics to try to bully a nation into accepting a foreign power. Because the fact of the matter was, the city in which we're talking about, which was Sarajevo, was a mixed bag culturally. There were Serbians there, but there were also many other different ethnic groups. And so what's going to happen is kind of a mixed result, mixed bag of things. But the story goes like this. Sarajevo was a hotbed of political discontent. They felt kind of ignored by the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and there was a big pro-Serbia movement that was trying to unite Sarajevo with Serbia, break free from the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And so what happened was there was this group known as the Black Hand that was getting weapons and training from Serbia for the purpose of trying to break the city free and joining Serbia. So the Archduke Franz Ferdinand took his family to visit Sarajevo to try to go on this peace tour. Now, the Archduke wasn't known for being incredibly charismatic. He was sort of cold. You know, he basically never smiled, never laughed, that sort of mentality. So he didn't really rub people in a very charismatic sort of way. But he also had the best interests of the country in mind. The thing also that folks don't realize is that while Austria was Christian, Hungary, the other half of the nation, was Islamic. So basically you had all these Muslim overseers overseeing Christians, and there was this whole religious issue as well. So Franz Ferdinand goes to Sarajevo to try to calm things down, and the Black Hand threatens to assassinate him. So when he gets to the city, he commences this tour, and he's got 3 cars. His car is in the middle. And basically they're going through the city, and there's all these people who are watching him come. And actually he got a pretty warm welcome, all factors considering. But what happened was there was a number of folks in the crowd from the Black Hand who were going to try to kill him. Now, 2 of the guys who were there didn't actually do anything, they chickened out. The next guy threw these homemade hand grenades, these bombs, at the Archduke's car, and basically what happened was the first one landed and missed and exploded and ended up throwing some shrapnel around the crowd and hit the car. The next one landed in the Archduke's car, but someone thinking really quickly grabbed it and hucked it out the back, and he was injured throwing the bomb, but the Archduke was fine, as was his wife. And so basically when this whole thing goes, the cars speed off and disappear, and basically the members of the Black Hand are like, crap, what are we going to do? And end up basically going out the way. So a number of the members of the Black Hands were instantly apprehended. Others tried to escape, and they had a backup plan. Instead of getting caught, they would take cyanide tablets and kill themselves, but the cyanide was weak. It didn't actually kill them, it just made them sick, so they puked it all up, which of course kept them from being poisoned in the first place. So basically it was epic fail. Like there was one dude, he wanted to make certain that he wasn't killed, so he leaped off a bridge. But the problem is the way the bridge the water had actually gone way, way, way down. So it was all this really muddy dirt. So what happened was he launched himself off the bridge after taking cyanide, and basically the cyanide caused him to get sick, so he starts basically puking while he's falling. And then he hits this mud, which cushions his fall just perfectly, so it doesn't actually hurt himself, except that it pushes on his stomach, so all of his poison comes out. So he ended up surviving and getting captured by the police. So epic fail, dude. Well done. And Gabriel Pisa escaped, and so he was freaking out like, what am I supposed to do now? And so he goes into hiding. Now, here's the thing is, he knows that some of his fellows have been captured, and he knows that they're basically going to be tortured until they reveal who all the conspirators were. So he's like, should I flee the country? What am I supposed to do? And while all that's going on, the Archduke has basically fled and has, gotten secure where he's going to go. Now, he ends up insisting to his driver that he wants to go visit the men who were injured in this attack. He basically said, I'm not going to be bullied by terrorists. And so the driver says, okay, we can do this, but I strongly suggest we change the course so we don't go where we're going to go. That way, any other terrorists aren't going to know where we are. So he says, okay, fine. Well, when they get back in the car and they start driving, they screw up and go the old way. And basically what happens is he ends up turning this corner and stops, realizing he's gone the wrong way, and starts putting the car in reverse and backing it up. Meanwhile, going back to Gabriel Precip. Gabriel Precip, after waiting for like an hour, has gotten kind of hungry, so he decides he's going to go get a sandwich from like a sandwich shop, like a vendor, like a little cart on the side of the road. And then he's going to decide what he's going to do. So he ends up coming up, getting the sandwich, and who is stopped right in front of him but Archduke Franz Ferdinand. So he ends up pulling out a pistol out of his pocket, shoots the Archduke, shoots his wife, and then gets caught, but not before he kills them both. Now, what's going to happen is Austro-Hungary is absolutely furious because of this. The heir to the throne has been assassinated. So they end up issuing an ultimatum to Serbia. The ultimatum is do this or else. It's the final set of amendments. They say, you need to apologize, and you need to back up off of Sarajevo. If you don't, we're going to go to war. Sarajevo says, you can't tell us what to do, or Serbia says, you can't tell us what to do, bring it. And so Austro-Hungary says, okay, fine, we're going to bring it. Oh, by the way, we're also bringing Germany with us because they're our big brother. There's this other massive power. And suddenly, oh, you got two enemies on you. And basically, Serbia is like, oh yeah, we also got England and France and Russia. What now? Germany's like, well, we're going to bring in the Ottoman Empire. Well, we're going to bring in Russia. And suddenly the war just explodes. Everybody in Europe's involved over something that was a relatively small thing. So basically, you could say World War I was started because of the sandwich.
It's your story.
Maybe a bonus question?
What caused World War I? A sandwich. That's the signing of the Hague Tribunal. Actually, I didn't talk about that. We talked about all that kind of. That kind of gives the idea. Let me show you some pictures. I'll come back to that. So first, the graph. The Triple Alliance and the Triple Entente. Remember how we were talking about those secret alliances? This is what they are. You can see we have Bulgaria and Serbia. That's tied to the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Germany, Italy, the Ottoman Empire, and on the right-hand side we have Russia, France, and Britain. Now this is an alliance right here, the green, the Triple Alliance, and the purple is the Triple Entente. An Entente is like an alliance. It's a union of countries, only an alliance is binding, an Entente is non-binding. Basically saying that if you're part of an alliance, everyone has to act together. If you're part of an Entente, then not so much.
What's the first one say? Triple what? Triple
Alliance and the Triple Entente, ENT. This is a similar map showing the same concept. Basically, all the countries in this sort of reddish white, I kind of almost a pink color, all those guys, they were allied together. And then you have all of these countries, all the white, are allied together. And then the yellowish countries, you'll see, are neutral. Belgium is going to start as neutral, but as we're going to see, that doesn't stick for long. Yeah.
What would happen if there was, like someone is alliance, say like, I don't know, I'm making a, Britain was alliance with France, and then France like went for, I don't, Russia, but Russia and, United States, we're gonna fight, but Britain was alliance with United States and France was alliance with Russia, and Britain and France are alliance.
Yeah. Where do they go with was your
Yeah.
question. This is where the balance of power comes in. Who's more powerful? Now, in the case of America, it wouldn't really work in this example because we were kind of off across the Atlantic Ocean, no one cared. But if you're talking about like Russia and Germany, who's more powerful? Because if Russia's more powerful, they'll tend to side against them and try to maintain that balance. Whereas if Germany's more powerful, they'll tend to side with Russia again to maintain the balance. Think of this like in a scale, which of course means everybody's really paranoid of like, are you really going to side with me? Are you going to switch sides or what the deal? That's kind of showing this graph right here. You've got all these different treaties and alliances and all these different peoples and groups all over the world who's allied with it. It was a giant mess, is the long and short of it. But this is the Archduke and his family. As I said, both he and she were shot and killed, and I swear the kids had like the hardest life for royals I think I've ever read. So what happened was the kids, both guys, ended up going to. Well, actually, I'm not sure if there were definitely two boys, and I think two boys and girls. How many kids they had? Anyhow, what happened was they ended up going and living with their uncle, who was sort of out of favor with the royal court, and so they ended up having really no power within the political structure, and so basically they lost their parents and tried to make the best of the situation. However, I don't know how much you guys know about World War II. When Nazi Germany came into power, they actually invaded Austria and took everything over. One of the first things they did was take any royals and chuck them off to concentration camps. So both of these kids ended up in, I think it was Dachau and then Auschwitz. And they ended up surviving. They lived up into the 1980s. But the Nazis particularly liked to make an example of them because they were seeing, the royals, so we're going to make an example of them. Their job was to clean the latrines every single day. But the kids basically just kind of like, well, we're just going to have fun with it and whatever, and just kind of like didn't let it bother them. And it's like, good God, you lose your parents, and then you end up in a concentration camp. It's just like, holy Christ. But yeah, it's kind of an interesting story, I think. This is Gabriel Aprizet. Again, you can imagine what happened to that guy. He was tortured for information. And then he was thrown in jail and basically forgotten about. He ended up dying at a very young age. I want to say by the time of his death, he weighed 60 pounds, which, to put that in perspective, my daughter, who is 4, weighs 40 pounds. So, he was basically starved to death, and he was scum of the earth in Austria, as you can imagine. That's one of the reasons why in Serbia, they see him quite differently. Anyways, this kind of summarizes a lot of these concepts. But basically, World War I begins because of this Serbian group wanting to exert itself in Sarajevo. And again, it's nationalism. Now, I'm going to give you a list here in a little bit of all the different European powers that were going to be involved in World War I. And what I want you guys to do is understand why everybody's joining the war. It's not exactly an easy task, but it's also not that hard, because it's all understanding the relationships between everybody. We'll explain those here in just a second. But the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, notice the date, June 1914, over 100 years ago.
And it's just kind of fascinating to think about because we're still experiencing a lot of changes that caused this or were caused by some of these things. Anyhow, it's pretty straightforward. Assassination leads to bigger problems, so on and so forth. Do you guys have any questions about any of this? I will say one of the terms we talked about was aggressive nationalism. So aggressive nationalism is basically just describing nationalists trying to go about setting up their own nations. It's a form of aggression. I mean, it's just like it says, it's just super nationalism in a sense. But countries, things like that. Basically, it can also talk about other countries trying to add their country, basically invasion, invading other countries and talking about it. It's a concept to understand. We good on this? Stay just a second then. I'm not 100% certain when the bell's supposed to ring, but I suspect we should be able to make it through this entire section, which is good stuff. It's hilarious hearing folks with their keyboards because they just and it makes it a heck of a lot easier. I'm glad they exist. Yeah. Yeah. Funny is my brother has a mechanical keyboard. You guys have seen those. It's a lot of coders, a lot of folks who work with computers like those really well. I don't really know why, but they're awesome, I guess. The thing that's funny is it's the loudest freaking thing on the earth. It's like, anytime I'm like on Skype with him or something like that, he starts typing something, it sounds like he's just like beating his computer to death.
Like a typewriter?
Kinda, it sounds kind of similar to that. Have you guys ever used a typewriter?
Yeah.
Fascinating. At the zoo. Yeah, because they got, okay, actually. Yeah, fascinating.
I want it.
That's so cool.
I remember typing a number of papers with typewriters.
I want a typewriter or
They are a tremendous
the
pain.
picture, like the Polaroid camera. Those are cool.
Fair point. Polaroids are kind of sweet. I will say this though, I'm shocked that someone hasn't come up with one of those like little attachments. Like you can get like the attachments for your computer, for your camera, just prints photos off. I'm shocked that they haven't made a little tiny portable one yet. I mean, yeah, it would be practical at all, but I mean that's no stopping.
They do have for your iPhones and stuff. You can like
Oh,
put
there you
out
go.
a Polaroid.
Yeah.
That one an actual.
One's better and one's
Not surprised.
eBay.
eBay, you can buy everything on eBay. Seriously, you can.
I love eBay.
I love that you can buy groceries on Amazon.
You can.
Oh yeah.
What?
My brother does that.
Like he buys like all his stuff or just like some?
Not really all, because he's kind of a fresh kind of guy. He loves to cook and he gets all the ingredients fresh. Like there's a lot of things like staples where it's like, we're gonna eat exactly this much of this thing this day. Like diapers. Just on Amazon, they deliver them the same time every month, so pretty helpful. Hey man, it's the future. You live in the future. It's fascinating. You go back and watch. What's that?
How do you think the Kardashians use their food?
Probably someone goes and gets it for them.
Or eBay, Amazon. They probably have.
I would say they probably have someone who shops for them because, that's the thing. Professional chefs, man. You can also make quite a bit of cash doing that if you know how to cook. It's just that, you basically have to put your life on hold as long as you do it. One guy was talking about how he was a personal chef on board a yacht. It's just kind of like what he did. People are always asking too. It's like, so like, have you heard of just like Kraft macaroni and cheese, things like that, anything like really stupid? No, because if they're paying for a private chef, that's not what they're eating. All right, so all these different reasons for going to war. Why does Germany get into war? To defend their ally, the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Austro-Hungarian Empire from Serbia. Serbia getting its Austro-Hungarian Empire. France, because it knew it was going to have to fight Germany at some point. Again, it wanted revenge for the Franco-Prussian War, but it didn't want to have to do it alone. So this is a great example to do it. Russia, to defend Pan-Slavism. Slavism, Pan-Slavism. Slav, as in Slavic, as an ethnic group. The idea was we're going to unify all Slavic countries, see the USSR. The idea is that we're going to defend all Slavic countries and their right to self-determination. Translation, we're hoping to take these countries over at the end of the war. England, to protect Belgium. We talked about how Belgium was originally neutral, but then they weren't on the map. Here's why. The Germans had set up several plans in order to attack France. And France, learning from its mistakes during the Franco-Prussian War, had spent a great deal of time fortifying all of the river crossways and mountain passes, whatever, entry points into the country to try to prevent Germany from just kind of marching into their nation again. So Germany couldn't just go through France. It didn't have a way of doing it. So it basically created a plan to go through Belgium. This plan was called the Schlieffen Plan. It was proposed by General Schlieffen. Originally, they asked Belgium, hey, would it be cool if we went through your country and attacked France? Belgium was like, how about no, we're neutral, we don't want any part of this. And Germany said, well, we're not asking, and just did it anyways. Well, this kind of bothered England. However, they had another major problem. If Germany steamrolls France again, this leaves their only major competitor right across the English Channel. So they weren't all about that. So they wanted to basically, again, maintain a balance, kick the Germans down a bit, and then you wouldn't have to have that as a problem. The Ottoman Empire was basically collapsing at this point. However, they had reorganized themselves in the early 20th century, what was known as the Young Turk Rebellion. And so the idea was to try to reorganize everything, but they had to worry about Big Brother Russia just coming in and stomping them down. So again, they wanted to try to keep from getting imperialized. Now here's where things get interesting. The Ottomans actually asked England, can we be on your team? England said no. So the Ottomans are like, crap. France? No. No one wanted anything to do with the Ottomans. The Germans went along with this, but they were really mostly interested in trying to act as a buffer between them and Russia. So, they ended up helping out the Ottomans. There's some kind of interesting stories about this. For instance, there's a battle where basically the Ottomans ended up shelling Sevastopol and then retreat back to the gates over the Ottoman Empire, the Ottoman territory, and this really kind of stirred the beehive with the Russians. But they did it with German ships, because what had happened is the Germans were fleeing from an English ship before the Ottomans even entered the war, and basically the Germans are like, hey, can we come into your port? Ottomans, they were like, sure. And so these German ships disappear, and the British are like, Ottomans, send out the Germans. Like, what Germans? There's no Germans. And then these battleships start rolling out, and basically it's all these German sailors and German officers. They're all wearing fezzes. It's like, we're Turks now. And they had a giant Turkish flag coming off. The name had been changed to different names, and so suddenly it's not German anymore. It's Turkish. So that was kind of silly and interesting. Also, it was kind of funny. There was a couple of battleships that the Turks actually ordered from the British, and the British said, yeah, you can have them, and built them for them, but then the war broke out, and they basically just stole the battleships from them. It was kind of pathetic, too, because the Ottoman Empire was so hard up for cash to build these things, they basically had to get, donations from the people to do it. So there are like stories of little girls running around with cans, begging for money. It's like the Girl Scouts, can you help us build a battleship? And they ended up building it, and then the British basically just took them. So, it was kind of a raw deal, but this is kind of how things go. And then Japan. basically, Japan was trying to imperialize all of East Asia. And not only did they consider with Russia, but also Germany. So they wanted to get the German territories in Eastern Asia, and so basically they sided with their enemies, who happened to be the British and the French in this particular war. So basically they had all this stuff going on as everyone sort of reacts to the war. And basically at the beginning of the war, everyone's talking about how quickly it's going to end. You know, people are being told, yeah, join the war effort, you'll be back home before Christmas. Well, let me tell you, that did not happen. In fact, as war breaks out, as it sets in, you know, as Christmas rolls around, you got all these people who are young men, first time they've ever been away from home, it's Christmas, they're celebrating it, such that it is, in the middle of a hole that's somewhere in the middle of northern France. What was kind of neat is there's a story that the British and the French were sitting there, and the white flag goes up on the German side. Now, the white flag doesn't mean surrender, it means peace, we want to talk. So, like, the Germans want to talk about something, what do they want to talk about? I don't know. So they go out there and they meet in the middle of no man's land, which is this area between the trenches that's absolutely devastated. And basically, the guys say, we just want to wish you a Merry Christmas. And so basically, all the soldiers started coming out of the trenches, leaving their guns behind, and decided they were just going to have a night where they weren't killing each other. So they ended up clearing out no man's land, they ended up playing a soccer game, and they started like wrapping Christmas presents, you know, like your enemy. It's like, you know, what do you need? You need a shaving razor? Okay. And they went and wrapped it up and Merry Christmas. And they exchanged gifts, they had a nice meal, they played a soccer game, and at the end of the night they said, one more time, Merry Christmas. They go back the next day, war's back on. Well, the thing is that it really had a negative effect to some extent on morale, because people were like, why are we doing this? Why are we fighting? You know, so you're right, it did have an effect. And of course, you know, the higher ups, the generals are pissed because they didn't say that this was okay, this is fraternizing with the enemy, because we don't want you to see the enemy as human. We want you to see them as monsters, because that's how you shoot and kill the enemy. So this kind of, you know, it's this kind of great story on the same token that didn't stop the war, not even close. But I think the fact of the matter is that to realize that peoples of different countries are a lot more similar than we often think. And, you know, the fact of the matter is you got to imagine being by yourself, there's no family, on Christmas, you know, you can kind of maybe see where they're coming from. The thing is, that's not the only time it's happened. I remember there was a story that came out of World War II. It was on Christmas, I forget what year. And basically there was this shelling going on. It just stopped. And if you've ever heard like a constant stream of explosions, the silence is deafening. It's just like the quiet is just unbelievable. And they start hearing the Germans singing Silent Night. And the British chime in, and they sing the song, and once the song's over, the shelling resumes. It's like these little moments of peace, you know. Because the thing is, these are human beings. That's the honest thing to remember, the hard thing to remember. These people doing these things in history, they were like us. You know, they were really not that different. And trying to live through these incredibly trying times, you know, it's just kind of wild. They actually did a movie on it though. It's called The Christmas Truce. There's a French film back there. It's called Joie de Noël. I've watched it in the past with my students before. We're not going to this time. I don't know. It's good, but everything's in French, so you have to kind of translate it, and it's just kind of long. So yeah, it's a whole big movie about an event that took like 12 hours. So. All right, we'll call that a day then.